Hi, this is Marcia.
And this is Kelly.
We are the 2U's of 2U's Fiber Adventures. Thanks for stopping by.
You'll hear about knitting, spinning, dyeing, crocheting, and just about anything else we can think of as a way to play with string.
We blog and post show notes at 2usfiberadventures.com.
And we invite you to join our 2U's Fiber Adventures group on Ravelry. I'm 100 Projects.
And I am Better in Motion.
We're both on Instagram and Ravelry, and we look forward to meeting you there.
Enjoy the episode.
Well, hello everyone. This is Kelly, and I'm here by myself today, giving you episode 65, Bee! And the reason I'm doing this is because I just had the absolute best bee weekend ever, and I wanted to talk to you about it. So, you know from the last episode that I was going to Sebastopol to pick up 2 packages of bees. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that, and then talk a little bit about some really exciting thing that happened that same weekend after I brought them home. So first of all, I was picking up 2 packages of bees last weekend at Bee Kind in Sebastopol, and I did manage to also stop at a yarn shop, Yarnitudes, in that same town, but that'll be waiting for the next episode when Marcia's here with me and we can talk about it together. Today, the episode is just all about bees, and so if you're not interested in bees, come back next week, and episode 66 will be our usual format. But for today, I'm going to skip the yarn and just talk about bees. So I was picking up 2 packages. The packages are boxes that contain approximately 3 pounds of bees. That's about 10,000 bees each. And Bee Kind is a shop that has honey and bee products like wax, lotion, beeswax lotion, and tinctures of propolis, which propolis is a resin that the bees collect from trees, and then they make it into a sort of a glue that they use to stick stuff together. And they sometimes will, if there's something that they don't like in their hive, they'll just like put a whole propolis case around it. It's kind of like gum in a way, and it has health properties. I've actually heard, although I haven't read any actual studies about this, but I've read that they think that in some ways propolis may be like the immune system. If you think of the hive as an organism, then propolis is part of the immune system of that organism. So anyway, it has tinctures of propolis and pollen and lotions and other kinds of bee products, but then it also has beekeeping supplies. And so the day that I was there, you order packages of bees back in January. For the most part, you order packages early because they run out. You don't know if you're going to get them or not. So it's possible that someone could have been coming in and ordering or buying a package that weekend, but most of us, maybe all of us, had already ordered these packages. So we show up, and they had a tent, like one of those canopy tent pop-ups, set up in their back parking lot. And they actually had a zip tent where they were keeping most of the packages, because they also have a lot of hives, and the other bees are kind of attracted to the packages. And so you can get the packages covered with a lot of hitchhikers, sort of loose wandering bees who are unclear where they belong, clinging onto the outside of the packages. And they don't really want that, because they're trying to give these to people to take home in their cars, like me. And you don't want any hitchhikers on the outside of the package to be then loose in your car while you're driving home. I thought they had a really nice setup, and they were really pleasant and gave me, good information when I picked up my packages, and were really helpful. So I had 2 packages, 10,000 bees, about 3 pounds of bees in each package. And I put a picture of what a package looks like in the show notes for the last episode. And actually for this episode, I had forgotten to mention this at the beginning, but I have quite a bit of video. And so I'm going to be uploading some video to YouTube. And this is my first time doing this. We'll see how it goes. It might be a little choppy because I'm going to put lots of little video clips together into one long video. But feel free to head over to the 2Use YouTube channel, 2Use Fiber Adventures YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. And I may be able to post some of those videos. I don't know if I can post a long video on the Ravelry page or not. But I'll at least post a short version on the Ravelry page so that you can then link from that to the YouTube channel as well. So you'll be able to have some visuals of what I'm talking about this time. So a package is, like I said, it's a box of bees with wire mesh screen on the two long sides. It has a can of sugar water hanging down, and the can has holes punched in the bottom so the bees can get food from the holes in the bottom of the can. So they have some food. They also have, in a little cage hanging down from the top of the box, is the queen bee. And she's closed in because when they make a package, they basically just take a queen that they've bred, put her in a box, put the box in the package, and then pour in a bunch of bees. And so the bees in the package are likely not all related to one another. They're not all necessarily from the same hive, and they aren't related at all necessarily to the queen. This is not the queen that they have been living with and that they know and love. So they aren't really predisposed to like her at first. And so she's inside of a cage to protect her. And as they realize that there is no one else, that they're not in their home and they're now in this new situation, and she's the only queen that they have, then they become more and more likely to accept her. But she needs to be protected from them at the beginning. So in the package, she's hanging down in a little cage, protected from the other bees. But they do seem to cluster around her, and I think fairly quickly, they recognize that she's what they have, and they better be happy with that. So a lot of times you'll see them all clustered around the queen in the box. They're all in a big clump, and they hang on to each other with their legs. So when they're hanging down, it's almost like, I don't know, it kind of has a like if you jiggle the box a little bit, it kind of drapes, like they kind of drape like fabric almost, because they're just clinging to each other by their legs. It's really an amazing, to me, that's one of the whole thing is amazing. Clearly I'm enamored of the whole process, but when they're in that package, or when they're making wax, and whenever they're in a situation where they're all hanging on each other, they really are very fabric-like in a way, and I just think that's really cool. So at Be Kind, they had two kinds of bees that you could purchase. Italian bees, which is a type of honeybee. Whenever you see a really orange or golden honeybee, it's usually an Italian, or that's sort of a bee with more of the Italian honeybee genetics. And then they also had local treatment-free bees. And I think maybe their Italian bees are also treatment-free. The local bees are bees that have come from swarms. They have survived for multiple winters with no treatment. And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for some treatment-free, disease-resistant, mite-resistant genetics to have in my apiary. I have the feral hive that I got out of the pipe. I'm not sure how wild they are. For all I know, somebody had a commercially raised hive that swarmed, and that's just like the second generation of that commercial hive. Or it could be that bees that have been in a tree for years and years and years through a swarm, and that swarm is coming from a truly feral population. And these local treatment-free bees are the same thing. They're from feral stock of some sort, and they are locally adapted to the climate. Now, Sebastopol is not really local to me. It was about 3 hours away, but it has a similar climate. It's a little warmer, but it has a similar coastal climate. Not right on the Pacific, but it has enough of the influence of the Pacific Ocean that I considered that to be a pretty good approximation of local genetics. Let me just talk a little bit about treatment. I am doing treatment-free beekeeping, and that means that my bees don't get any antibiotics. They don't get any miticides. They don't get anything extra to help them, any treatments to help them. I do feed them if they need to be fed. So sugar water is something that they will get, but I'm not using any essential oils. I'm not using oxalic acid or formic acid or Coumaphos or any of the chemical treatments for pests and disease. And why am I doing that? Well, this is kind of a controversial thing in beekeeping. Prior to the 1980s, there were antibiotics used for certain kinds of diseases, but there wasn't the worry about mites that we have now. And over the years, the use of antibiotics has become less popular in all sorts of agriculture. There's resistance to antibiotics, and that's a bad thing. And so there has been a reduction in the use of antibiotics. But the varroa mites that came in the 1980s were something that the bees had not had encountered before, and they became a real problem, and they are a disease vector. They're also sort of a parasite. They suck I guess bees don't really have blood, but basically they're a blood sucker, and they attach to they go into the little honeycomb cell and lay eggs, and then those eggs hatch, and then those mites attach to the larva and basically suck its blood and weaken it. And then also can also transmit other kinds of disease. So it's been a real problem for bees, and it's a real problem for beekeepers. And so the first reaction was miticide. We have existing pesticides that are used to treat other kinds of animals, livestock, who have mites, and so those miticides are then used on bees. But it's a little bit problematic because basically, okay, mites are not insects, but basically it's like you're treating an insect for an insect infestation with an insecticide. So I'm poisoning the mites, but at the same time I'm kind of poisoning the bees. And so that just didn't make sense to me for my own style of beekeeping. And I don't use pesticides in my vegetable garden. I don't use pesticides for my flower garden. And so it didn't make sense to me to put pesticides on my bees in order to keep them from having mites. But mites are still a problem. So the idea, and the other reason, thinking about, just to talk about my reasons, the treatments that you give to bees, these chemicals that are put into the hive, the pesticides, go into the wax. Again, if you think of the beehive, the colony, as an organism, the wax of a beehive is similar in some ways to the liver and kidneys. It is where a lot of the toxins are sort of safely stored away from the bees, right? So the they go into the wax and they are sort of sealed there. But I want to use my wax. I want to make lip balm. I want to make hand cream or, hand bars. I'm interested in the wax of my bees, and I don't really want wax that on my lips that has these residues of these chemicals. And just about every wax that they test has these residues in them. And some does come from, bees going to plants, and plants already have some kind of pesticide on them. But a lot of it is coming from the treatment of the bees. So this was another reason for me to want to have treatment-free beekeeping. And then the third reason is that, in my view, from what I've read, I have really two choices. As a hobbyist beekeeper, I'm not making my living with bees, and so I have these two choices. And my one choice is to breed a mite-resistant genetics in my bees, and my other choice is to breed treatment-resistant mites in my beehives. And since I'm not making a living with my bees, I'm not dependent on my bees living and not making it through, I'm able to have that luxury of saying, well, I'm going to do sort of a survival of the fittest type thing, and the bees that survive the mites are the ones that I'm going to breed from. So that's my philosophy. It's actually a super controversial topic in the beekeeping world. It seems, from what I've heard, the more hobby beekeepers there are, the more backyard beekeepers there are, the more women there are in beekeeping, the more interest there has been in how can we work on treatment-free beekeeping where we don't interfere so much with chemical treatments, and where we are working toward bees who are resistant to mites as opposed to mites who are resistant to the chemicals. So that's why I ended up getting my bees from this particular place, because that is what they had. So I got my bees and I put them in the car, and I ended up, because it was super hot that day, I ended up having to put them in the front seat. I have a 2-seater, and I had to put them in the front seat on the floor to kind of keep them out of the direct sunlight. And I was a little worried that it would be intimidating with the buzzing and all that. But my car is a 2000, and it's kind of loud. It's not that well insulated, so I really couldn't hear the bees. I mostly just heard the regular road noise that I always had. But there was something really compelling about looking at them, so I had to make sure I didn't spend too much time glancing over at how they were doing, because I needed to keep my eyes on the road. So it was really kind of a non-event driving home with them. It wasn't anything intimidating, and I had no hitchhikers on the outside of my box, and there's no danger that any of them were going to get out of the package. So when I got home, I actually got home early enough that I was able to install them that night, which I was really excited about, because I really didn't want to have to wait a full 24 hours. You want to install the package at night, because that way the bees are not going to be likely to go off, trying to forage or trying to look for anything. They're just going to want to stay with the queen, because it's too late for them to be going out. And it gives them a full, evening of being in the hive with the queen, kind of get their bearings of, okay, now this is where I live. So I was able to install them, and it went really well this year. I was so pleased. The first year that I installed the packages, I didn't know what to expect. The motor skills of the installation were really challenging for me. That sounds silly, but you have to pull out the can. You have to make sure the queen doesn't fall down into the pile of bees. She's hanging from the top, so you need to keep a hold of that little thing that attaches the queen cage to the top. Then you have to pull that out. You have to close the hive back up, and you have to pull a cork out of the queen's cage, and you have to put in a candy plug. And the candy plug is designed so that it's really kind of an ingenious idea. The idea is you want the bees to not be able to get at the queen before they have decided that she's their queen and they're fine with her. So they have a candy plug in this little tiny, like 2-inch box, little queen cage. So the bees will eat that candy out. They'll eat the sugar out of the hole. And by the time they've eaten out all the sugar and there's a big enough hole for the queen to come out of, they're all used to her. And they've accepted her as their queen, theoretically, and everything's great. So that's what I needed to do. And like I said, I have uploaded the video. The video of me installing the package was maybe about 10 minutes or so. And I've just put it in. I think what I'm going to do on YouTube is put the whole thing all together in one video, but it may be in 2 parts. So when you go and look at it, you'll see if it's in 2 parts, it'll be the installation, and then it'll be the excitement of the next day, which I haven't talked about yet, but very exciting. Preview of coming attractions. So the installation of the package actually went really smoothly. I decided not to wear gloves. You really don't need to wear gloves with the swarm or with a package. They're not defensive of anything. And so as long as you are careful not to squish a bee with your fingers, you really don't have to worry so much about wearing gloves. And so I decided that I wasn't. Now, I'm not still, and you'll see this in the video, I'm not super comfortable with the bee walking around on my hand. I want to be comfortable with that. I just think it would be cool to be able to have a bee walking on my hand and not be sort of freaked about it. But it still gets to me. But I'm working on that. But I didn't wear gloves, so I was able to feel things better, and the motor skills were a lot easier for me. And so I was able to take out the can of sugar water and cover up the hole to keep most of the bees in there until I was ready, get the queen out. I was able to put the candy plug in for them to chew out the candy. And then I had to wire her into a frame. And by the way, there's a few different ways to keep bees. And one of the ways is with wax foundation. So you give them a frame in their beehive that is a thin sheet of wax that has little hexagons stamped on it. And then they build from there, they build their full honeycomb that has the cells. You can also use plastic foundation. So again, it's a thin sheet of plastic that has the little hexagons stamped on it. And then they build their wax out from there. What I am doing, again, because I don't want to use wax that has been treated, I am doing a foundationless beekeeping system. And this is where you have empty frames and the bees build all of the wax. So they don't have anything to start them off in terms of a sheet of wax. And, in a wild hive, they don't either. They know how to do it. And so that's kind of my philosophy of beekeeping at the moment. And I use frames with no foundation. So I had to take the queen cage and wire it, stick it in there, attach it to the frame, secure it with rubber bands, put the frame into the hive, and then so half of the hive was filled with frames, and then the other half of the hive, and if you've ever seen a bee package installation, you might have seen where people take the package of bees and they turn it over and they dump it in and shake it to get all the bees out of the package box and into the hive box. Well, 2 years ago when I got my first packages, I learned that you don't have to do that. You don't have to dump them in and shake them in. You just have to make a space in your box, put frames in one half of the box, and then you take your package box and you slide that into your beehive box, and they will within a couple of days I'll walk out of the package box and start working on the frames where the queen is. And then in a couple of days, you go into the hive and you take that package box out. And so that's what I did. And it was really smooth. I didn't have a ton of bees flying in the air. I didn't have the sort of violent shaking of bees into the hive that has a tendency to put a lot of bees in the air and make them even more confused than they already are. And so it just really went smoothly, and I was really happy. I was really happy with it. They just came on out, and then a couple days later, I was able to go in and take out the package boxes from each of my hives and fill that empty space with frames, and everything was really, really good. So that was my installation. And like I said, it went really smoothly, and I was really pleased with myself. And that was on Saturday because I had gotten back. I went to Be Kind on Friday, I went to Sebastopol on Friday, spent the night, picked up my bees Saturday morning at Be Kind, and then drove home. So Sunday, and this is part of the reason that I really was dying to podcast about this, to record about this. Sunday, I got up and went out with my knitting. I was doing laundry and other things, but I got my knitting, and I went out and sat my chair down, and I'm sitting in and watching these 2 new hives, watching the activity, just kind of hanging out with the bees, watching what's happening, seeing how they're doing, watching my existing hive, kind of comparing the difference between the three hives, the 2 new ones. How is one package different than the other? One of them slept late, the other one started earlier because of, I think, the way the sun hits the hives. My existing hive, they really wake up early. They're going even when the sun is just barely up. They're the feral bees, and I think they're just more industrious. they're just harder workers than the non-feral bees, the sort of softer, well-fed, comfy bees. Anyway, I'm sitting there watching, and the bees from the 2 new hives are out doing what we call orientation flights. So they're sort of hovering right around the hive, and they do this, and they make it like sort of bigger and bigger figure eights, and they're just getting their bearings, figuring out the landmarks around the hive, sort of geolocating, so they know how to come back to the hive when they go out and forage. And every time you have a batch of new bees hatch or emerge, come out of their cocoons, they come out and they do this orienting. And then whenever you change something, like these bees are in a new hive, they come out and they do this orienting. So I'm watching the orienting, and then I look over at the existing hive, and they look like they're doing the same thing. And they usually have orienting. My existing hives have had orienting behavior usually in the late afternoon, like 3, 4 o'clock, something like that. And I thought, man, it's kind of early for them to be doing orienting, but I guess they have some hatching going on in that existing hive. So I took a picture, I sent it to Robert, like, yeah, there's orienting going on all the hives today. And all of a sudden, bees just started pouring out of my existing hive. Not the 2 new ones, but the one that I had before. They just started pouring out. And there were just tons of bees, and I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I'm actually witnessing the start of a swarm. So what is a swarm? A swarm actually is a way that a colony of bees reproduces. So when they start to feel like they don't have enough space, or it's hot, and they're too crowded to regulate the temperature well. So still really a space issue. Or they have stored nectar, because they store nectar in the cells of the little hexagon cells. They've stored nectar in so many of the cells that they don't, and they have brood, being raised in so many of the cells that they don't have any cells left. So again, a space issue. So what it really boils down to is when the colony has been successful enough to use up all their space, they reproduce. And so that's what a swarm is. So apparently my hive thought they were doing well, thought they were a little too crowded. And what they do is they raise another queen. And then the old queen and about half the bees leave the hive in a swarm. And so that's what was happening. So they left the hive in this swarm, and oh my gosh, it was amazing. It took about 25 minutes. They just filled the air. There were like maybe 2 to 3 bees in every 6-inch square. Well, I guess it would be a 6-inch cube. 2 to 3 bees in every 6-inch cube of sky. I mean, they were dense. And they flew from the hive out, and they were kind of swirling around in the sky. And then I could kind of tell it looked like maybe they were going to land in the fig tree. And that's exactly what happened. After about 25 minutes, I was watching them for about 15 minutes. And by about 15 minutes, I could tell where they were going to land. And then it took them another 10 minutes to actually all land there in the fig tree in this big clump. And oh my God, it's super exhilarating, really intimidating. I was standing up against the wall of the garage taking video because I didn't want to be in the traffic path. I didn't want to be run into by bees. And essentially, that's really the only danger in a swarm situation like that, is that you might get stung because they run into you and get smashed in some way. But, they're not chasing after a person, or they're not swarming after anything. They're just going to a new location. So I'm standing with my back up against the garage, kind of out of the way of the main traffic, videoing this on my phone. Super, super exciting to watch. But I have to admit, a little bit intimidating. And then I was really afraid that they were going to go into my neighbor's yard, which I really didn't want, because at least, they're intimidating to me and I'm used to them. So you really don't want this to be happening in your neighbor's yard. So anyway, they finally landed on the fig, and I took some pictures, and I called Marcia, and I talked to her about it. And then I went and got my equipment because I was going to put them in one of my hive boxes. Well, as I was gathering my equipment, I look over and I see them lifting off from the fig tree. I'm like, oh no. Okay, well, shoot. And so I just watched them again. Where are they going to land now? Hopefully they'll stay in my yard. It turned out they landed in my apple tree, actually closer to where the hive they just left. And that took another maybe 20 minutes for them to decide, to like swirl around, and then a little vortex above the apple tree, and then settle on the apple tree in a clump. Actually, it's called a cluster. So they were all settled in a cluster. So then it was just a matter of, okay, well, let's see. Let's figure this out. So Robert got a ladder, and in the fig tree it would have been easy because they were a lot lower. In the apple tree they were a little higher, so we did need a ladder, but it wasn't too bad. So he got out the ladder, and we have a little patio table, and he sort of straddled the patio table on top of the ladder to give it a little bigger platform. And then we put the hive box, up on top of that table. And then I went up the ladder, and in this case I was wearing my veil because I didn't want him to land in my face or, hit me in the face. And that was a lot of bees. So I went up the ladder, and I was wearing my gloves, and I took the branch, and I just took the branch and gave it a big sharp jolt, and the clump went plop down into the box. Not all of the bees landed in the box. Some of them were still on the apple tree. But then I have a natural bristle paintbrush, and I just kind of gently brushed the bees from the branch as much as I could down into the box. And that took a little while to get, all of the bees off of the crotch of the branch into the box. But apparently the queen was in the box, the hive box, because it didn't take long before they were all sort of fanning to say, okay, we're here. They have a gland on their abdomen that releases a pheromone, and then they beat their wings really hard to release this pheromone that tells all the other bees this is where they should come. And so pretty soon they were all just filing into the box, and so I had my first swarm capture. So yeah, it was the best bee weekend ever. I bought 2 packages of bees and brought them home. They were successfully installed. I felt smooth and comfortable. I didn't have any of the same problems that I had obviously I'm more experienced, but the issues that I had the first year when I installed the package, I was past those issues. And then the swarm happened, and I actually got to see it. I mean, how many people are actually home when this happens, right? And so I got to see it, and then not only did I get to see it, but I got to get it into the box successfully. And so anyway, I just had the best bee experience ever, and I wanted to share it with you. I'm right now sitting in a hotel room. I had a conference travel this weekend, so 2 weekends in a row of travel. But I had this conference travel, and I brought all my recording equipment because I thought, I am going to sit down at some point while I'm in the hotel, and I'm going to get this recorded because I just want to share it with everyone. I don't know how many of you are interested in a bee-only episode, but I knew it was too much to include in a regular episode, and I thought, well, I'll just give you a bonus episode all about bees. So hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're knitting. I'm enjoying my knitting here in the hotel room, but we'll talk about that next week. Today was just about bees and my best bee weekend ever. So, all right, bye. Thank you so much for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, visit 2usfiberadventures.com. We have links for iTunes, Google Play Music, YouTube, and others.
Join us on our adventures on Ravelry and Instagram. I am Better in Motion, and Kelly is 100 Projects.
Until next time, we're the 2 U's
doing our part for World Fleece.